Hey y'all, I'm Amy Cedar and I'm alcoholic. Hey, thank y'all for having me. Steve, thanks for inviting me up. Had a long time to think on the way on the car ride here. And I'm from High Point. My home group, I'll go ahead and give y'all my housekeeping. I've been sober since September the 14th, 2017. That wasn't my first sobriety date, but I hope by God's grace and mercy that that's my last. I do have a home group. It's West End. We meet on Monday nights at 7:30 in High Point. The first meeting of the month is always a speaker meeting and open discussions every Monday after that. And Steve mentioned my old timer, Roy. And the reason why I call him he's my old timer, because if you don't have an old timer in your circle, get one, because they'll save your life. And Roy did that for me. You'll learn later on in my story that families don't always come back, even after you get sober. And in my case, that happened for me. My family didn't come back. But I did have a dad and Roy, a mom and his wife. That was a true member of our sister fellowship, Al-Anon. And she had been in there for 58 years. So anyways, I'm so grateful that I was around just to meet them and to be able to be in their presence sometimes. I do have a sponsor today. Her name is Sandy. She does know that I'm sponsored by her. She hears from me. I talk to her on a regular basis, and we work the steps as outlined in the big book. And then I sponsor women today. And for that, I wasn't always looking forward to that, because I didn't think I had anything to offer, kind of like standing up here tonight, like, why would y'all want me to speak? But I know that's all ego. Anytime I'm thinking better of myself or worse of myself, I'm living in ego. And when I'm in ego, I'm edging God out. So I have to remember I'm just a drunk just like y'all are. And y'all have a story similar to mine. It might look a little different in how you got here, but we felt the same desperation on the inside, and that's what's kept me. The desperation, when I came in this last time, I came crawling through the door, and I had nowhere else to go. This was the last house on the block for me. Nobody wanted me, and I was kicked out from prison. So, and here I am, But I'll tell you a little bit just to qualify myself. I'm from Winter Haven, Florida. It's Central Florida. It's about 30 minutes from Orlando and 30 minutes north of Tampa. So, I grew up on a chain of lakes. There was 21 lakes that were connected by a canal, and Cypress Gardens was on one of them, but now it's known as Legoland. But we were there in the olden days when we just had Southern belles and big dresses and boat tours around in beautiful gardens. And we lived on the other side of the lake from that place. So we would sneak in. I had an older brother, 4 years older than I was. I had a dad that was a long-distance truck driver and a mom that was a nurse. So I was a latchkey kid, rode our bikes to school. I was raised in the 80s, so we were latchkey kids, the Gen X time, and we drank out of water hoses, and I didn't die. So that's all good. Climbed trees, mud bogged in the orange pit, in the orange trees, and we would play hide and seek at night in the 4x4s, and on our CBs we'd turn out our lights and try to make it through the orange grove without killing each other. So that was all good fun. But when I got here, I would have told you that I had a crappy childhood and that I wasn't loved very much until I worked the steps, and I learned that it was somewhere in the middle. Nobody had a perfect childhood. Nobody had the worst. That's somewhere in the middle. When I got here, I thought I was abandoned. That was one of my biggest words I would use, because I was always the victim. And I was abandoned by everybody I ever loved. And that's what I would tell everybody, right? Poor, pitiful Amy. What I know to be true today after working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is that I abandon others all the time. I would be the one to leave. I am a fight or flight, and I will go when I feel a little bit edginess coming on. I'm going to go, because I don't want to face up to whatever I've already conjured up. So I'll run before it gets bad. And to know today, from sticking around and going through the hard stuff in life and whatever I think is the trouble, 90% of the time it's in my own making, right? I make up all this stuff. I go down the rabbit hole before I even make it. And I'm like, gosh, before I know it, like I have a splinter on my toe, but my foot's got to be cut off, I know y'all probably don't think like that. But so At 7 years old, I was a flower girl of my babysitter's wedding, and I was born and raised Catholic. And I used to laugh and say I'm a recovering Catholic. But what I know to be true today is that it set me a good set of morals up in my life. It showed me right from wrong. I didn't understand the power because that God, when I was younger, was transactional. You do this, I'll get this. If I don't do this right, I'm going to hell, whatever. So my whole life, my power relationship was a little transactional. Like I prayed, that was a Santa Claus God to me, and if he didn't give me what I wanted, then he didn't love me enough, right? So, but it tells us in our book to see where religious people were right, so I am finding that out in my journey. So anyways, I was a flower girl, and I had all the isms before I started drinking. Y'all probably heard that hundreds of times from this podium, but I was the everything that we are without a drink. I probably needed a drink, which I did at 7 years old. And I'm at this wedding, and there was 3 champagne fountains in this wedding, and there was probably 150 people there. Is what I remember. My, what does it call our big magnifying mind? Well, at 7 years old, it looked like a lot of people, and to me, it was about 150. Whether that's the truth or not, I don't know. But I would sit on everybody's lap, and on everybody's lap, they'd give me a sip of champagne. So by the end of the night, I made it through all those people. I was drunk. And I don't know that I knew that I was drunk, but I knew whenever I got home, I'm laying on the hallway floor in my flower girl dress, sweating profusely, and couldn't get up. And all I remember is my mom going, "Oh, Amy's drunk." And I thought, oh. But what I do remember, I don't remember the effects produced by alcohol that night, but I do remember the attention that I sought. And that all the attention was good for me, right? So I wasn't a daily drinker after that, but I knew something had happened or whatever. So at 14, well, let me take you back to the 8th grade. I walked to school about 6 blocks, and I was walking to school that morning, right in between my 8th grade year, and I was jerked into a car, and I was sexually assaulted. And that's all I'll tell you. If you want to know any more, we'll talk after the meeting. From that point on, I was 14 years old. And from that point on, my life changed. I have a little girl from that today. She just turned 34 in July. And she's the love of my life today. At first, I thought, what am I going to do? My mom and dad, we were from a small town. And my mom and dad, I'm sure, got a lot of flack for that. We went through trials and in court and a couple of plastic surgeries, and I was still a teenager. And back then, kids didn't want to hang out with me. We were in a small town, and either the girls' parents wouldn't let them hang out with me because of who I was pregnant, and the boys didn't want to hang out with me unless they thought I was easy, right? And that's just the truth. So I didn't have that growing up. I had me and her living in my parents' house. And I became a mom really young, really quick. My mom went babysit. She said, you're going to have this kid and you're going to be the mom. And so I was. I remember going to school, taking her in her stroller, dropping her off at the sitter, grab my book bag and walk to school. After school, pick her up, walk home, feed her, change her, and do my homework. And that's how my childhood life went. No baseball games, no football games on Friday night. Definitely not homecoming or prom. And I say all this to say later I drank over that for so long, saying I lost my childhood. I deserved this, right? Because I ended up being the victim for many, many years over that. And I drank over that. And I'd go to the bars and I'd have your pity in one hand and your drink in the other, right? Because that's what I do. Today, that little girl is not an alcoholic. She has 4 little babies today that call me Nana, and none of them have ever seen me drink. And that is a blessing. I put that poor kid through the ringer. But anyway, so I go on to high school and all that, and I don't know how, but one night I got with a girl, and we end up at a lake one night, and we drank Strawberry Hill Boone's wine. I don't know how we got it. I don't know how we got there. I don't know anything that night. I just remember drinking. And I remember drinking that whole bottle. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, I thought, I need more. So from early on, I drank alcoholically. I drank until I either passed out, ran out, or, then I would find ways to get more, or just blacked out. And I like the effects produced by alcohol. I like anything that changes the way I feel. Anything. And I am so grateful that I found this program because I should have been dead a long time ago. But anyways, I didn't start daily drinking from that point on either. But at 18 years old, as soon as I could move out of the state of Florida, I did. And I moved up to Albemarle, North Carolina. And how do you come from Orlando to Albemarle? I don't know. But I move up here. I'm working at a plastic factory, and I have a 4-year-old with me, and we're starting this new life because I think if I move away from Florida, things will get better. You know, I'll be away from all that stuff. I can be a new me. I didn't know I was doing a geographical change before I was ever really an alcoholic. But I do know that when I drink, I can't stop. And on page 41, it tells us what makes me an alcoholic is once I put it in my body, the obsession sets off and I can't stop. My body starts craving it and I won't stop. And I don't know what'll happen. And for me, it gets worse and worse because it's a progressive illness. I don't know what to do with my hands, right? So, but anyways, it's like in pictures. You're like, what do I do with these? But anyways, so we move up to North Carolina, and I think this is great. Just me and her. We're going to start our fresh life. And a guy that worked in our plant lived in Greensboro, and he said, I got this boy I need you to meet. And I was like, I don't need no boys. Me and her are just fine. And about a month of him saying this to me every day, I'm like, look, dude, have him call me tonight at 7:30. And that's back before cell phones, you know. For all you youngsters, there were phones that used to hang on a wall that you pick up and you would dial. That was back in our era. And I said, have him call me tonight at 7:30. And if he calls me at 7:31, I'm not going to answer. Well, at 7:29, the phone was ringing. And I thought, look at me, my first victim. I didn't think that he was my victim. I thought I was in love, right? So 6 months later, I'm moving to Greensboro. He has a condo, a job, a car. And my daughter needed a dad, right? And that's the truth. So I moved in with this man. I married him 6 months after that. And we had this whole family. And he adopted my daughter when she was 6. And he is still her dad today. And they still have a really good relationship. Anyways, so we had all the things, right? I was a paramedic. I went to school and I was a paramedic for 16 years. And we achieved stuff pretty quickly, right? We kind of fall up the ladder. So I was the head paramedic for 9 of those years in Guilford County. And I worked a lot. And I started to drink because I started hanging out with people after work. And I started to drink and I remembered what drinking felt like. So I started talking him into drinking because we were really big in the church, right? Because when I do things full force. I'm going to teach Sunday school. I'm going to teach the young kids. I'm going to do all the things because I kept trying to fill this hole inside my soul or this internal void with something external my whole life. If I get that car, I'll be fine. If I get that house, I'll be fine. If I get that kid, that dog, that job, whatever, I thought I would be okay. And what I know today, it comes from on the inside. People can't make me happy. Things can't make me happy. They can add to my happiness, but they can't make me happy. That's a tough job. That's a tough job to try to make me happy. And I didn't know all those things before I reached Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I have this happy life, this kid, this job, this husband, the house, and my parents are proud of me. And I start drinking, and I start drinking on the weekends, and the weekends start, y'all know the story, they go into Thursday, and then they go into Monday, and then before you know it, I've been drinking all week, and I'm hiding it, and I hide it in the kitchen cabinets, and I didn't even realize I was hiding alcohol until we moved to Charlotte, when his job got relocated. We had movers come in and move us to Charlotte, and they put our boxes in each room. That was labeled. It was real nice. And I went to unload the kitchen boxes, and I opened it up, and it was a whole box of empty bottles of liquor. And I thought, holy crap, they didn't throw these away? That's what was hidden behind my pots and pans. And I thought about it briefly, and I thought, I gotta do something better with those. Not that I'm going to stop drinking, but I got to figure out somewhere else to hide those. But and then it just got progressively worse. In 2008, I got diagnosed with breast cancer from an infertility drug I took 10 years prior to get pregnant because I couldn't have any more children after that. And I really wanted to have another baby. And I'm so grateful for her because that was it for me. And anyways, 10 years later, I get diagnosed with breast cancer and go through chemotherapy, and I went through 60 rounds of chemotherapy and 4 radiation treatments, and then finally had surgery. But back then, insurance wouldn't. Anyways, that's a whole nother story. But so it was a long process, and the doctor gave me a prescription that says do not drink, do not take with alcohol. And I thought that is for normal people. I can do this, and because I'm different, right? I'm always different. I can handle it, and my life began to get worse. My alcoholism turned for the worse at that point. I did that for about 2 years, and one day I pull in. Now, we moved from Greensboro to Charlotte due to his job, and had a really hard time learning the maps in Charlotte to become a paramedic there. So I would travel an hour and a half back and forth to High Point to work, and I was working 12-hour shifts, and it was long, and I would drink all the way home to Charlotte. And then I would sleep a day and go back. So I was never home, and I was drinking a lot more. And then I'm going through chemo and all this stuff, so I'm doing whatever I can to get to work because I needed to drink. And everything was based on how I felt. And I always made myself, I think, feel worse than I really did because I needed different stuff, right? I would be like, oh, I'm really hurting today, or whatever the case was, just so I could feed my alcoholism. And so anyways, it comes to a time I can't do this driving anymore, so I can't find a job. And back then, in Charlotte, they would hand you blank maps, no road names, and you would have to fill in the roads. This was before GPS. And if you missed a road name, you didn't get the job. And it was crazy down there, and I'm like, I'm never going to get this job. So I didn't try. Right, because I'm one of those people that I'm not a great starter and a poor finisher. I hear that a lot from the podium. Great starter, poor finisher. But for me, I don't start it unless I know I can perfect it. Unless I know that I'm going to do that great. I use this as an example. Like if I don't sit down at a piano and play a beautiful melody, I'm not trying. A friend of mine said, why don't you try piano lessons? I'm like, oh, that seems like work. Right? So that's just who I am at the core. I just am not going to do it unless I know it's going to be great. And so anyways, I went, packed a duffel bag that night. I looked at my family of 16 years and told him I was leaving. He was like, where are you going? I said, back to High Point. Well, the only thing I know about High Point is where I would pick some patients up on the wrong side of town, wherever. So I got in the car. I left that family. And I watched that man hold that little girl and watch me pull out of the driveway and never look back. But when I got here, I was the one that had abandonment issues. I'm not proud that I left that little girl. And I'm not proud that I left that man that loved me. But what I know today is that I would have tore their lives completely apart if I would have stayed. So I drive to High Point and I pull up at this store at 5 Points. That don't even sound right? 5 Points, anyways, I go to this store and I wait in that parking lot until I find people that drink like I did. And there, it's set. It's gone. I mean, I am off to the races for sure. At this point, I'm renting my car out. I'm doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Car gets impounded. Now I'm on the streets. Living in abandonments. I call them abandonments. Houses that don't have windows that are boarded up, that's where I stayed. And I would walk the streets all night long. I'd jump in and out of cars, and I would do things a lady should never do. And I'm not proud of that either, but I had an addiction so strong that I had to do what I had to do to get one more because I couldn't live without it. And I started going in and out of jail. And jail was my safe place. They knew me there. They knew me by name. As soon as I'd walk in, I'd have a reprieve. You know, our book talks about a daily reprieve. That was my reprieve. I got to have a shower, and I got to eat. And I got to sleep and not worry about anybody touching me. And it was a relief for me to be in jail. And I did that for a long time. I got sentenced to prison. I did a little bit for 18 months, came out, and I didn't know. I didn't know that. I didn't know. I didn't know that I was an alcoholic. I didn't know there was anything like this. I wasn't taught anything about it. People weren't bringing meetings into that prison. And I got out and I did the same thing that I knew what I did. You know, it says nothing changes if nothing changes, right? So I knew what I was comfortable with, and I knew that old life would never be part of this life, that this is it. The book talks about my alcoholic life seems the only normal one. And at that moment, at that time, it was my normal life. This was it. And I was okay with it. This is how I'm going to live. I'm never going to have that life back. And I'm okay with it. So I go back into jail. So when I ask God for help and I yell out that alcoholic prayer, God help me, mine always comes in the form of law enforcement. So I'm like, here we go again. I'm like, I didn't mean that, God. I meant like, give me a house or give me, you know. So my God has a sense of humor. And so I go back. And at this point, I'm an habitual criminal. And the judge sentenced me to 7 years. I did 14 months in county, and I got out in 5, 58 months. So I did almost 7 years that time. But while I'm there this time, I get introduced to DART program. And, yes, I got time. And the DART program, I didn't know what that meant, but I thought that judge, how dare he sentence me to that? He doesn't know who I am. I'm in prison, y'all, thinking, I don't belong here. Dude, I did everything under the sun. I was a habitual criminal, and I don't belong there. I am so crazy. Either better than or less than, right? I don't belong where I am. And if this isn't part of your story, it can be. And because I never thought it would be part of mine. And I go into this DART program, and I go in with all these women. I live in this quad full of women, and I thought, this is crazy. I have to go to this alcohol drug program. Who does they think I am? I'm just with the wrong people at the wrong time. If I wouldn't have went that night, I wouldn't have got caught, right? So I go in there, and I hear these women telling my story. It was a little different, kind of like mine is tonight, and but something happened. And I felt at home in prison with nothing. No family writing me letters, no nothing. My mom flew to High Point Jail in 2008 and said that women and people in her family don't go to prison. And that was the last time she talked to me. My brother fell right in line with her. Anyways, so I start working on me. And I start hearing all these things that were just like one day at a time, and easy does it, and things like that. It all started clicking, and I became, in like 90 days, I became the quad monitor. I became, doing all this because I'm like super sober, and so I'm going to teach y'all how to be sober, but I haven't worked a step yet. And and at the end of that prison sentence, I remember I had nowhere to go. I had nothing, nowhere to go. My case manager called me in, and she's like, "Where are you going?" I said, "Nowhere. I don't have nowhere." She goes, "Where do you need your train ticket to?" And I was like, "I guess the High Point. I don't know." She goes, "Listen." I said, "I shouldn't have. I have nobody, and I have nowhere to go." And she said, "Listen, Amy." She goes, "Do you know how many men's prisons are in the state of North Carolina?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And she told me. I think it was around 70 something. She said, "Do you know how many women's prisons are in the state?" I said, "No, ma'am." She said, 3. She said, "Do you know why?" She said, "Men aren't worse than women." She goes, "Women never make it this far. Women die in their disease, or they die in their home trying to take care of children, and they never make it here." And that changed my whole outlook on while I was in that prison, that I was a miracle and that I was saved, right? Because I should have been dead doing the things I did. So she sends me out into an Oxford house, and I move into an Oxford house, and I get a sponsor because I heard people say get a sponsor. And I get the one that everybody tells me to get because I guess they had seen me in and out a lot and in between prison sentences. And they told me this lady, and I'm like, I don't know who she is. Well, they said she's the big book bumper. And I said, I don't even know what that means, but okay, where is she? Sign me up. And they were like, she goes to Wednesday night meet. And I was like, no, it's Saturday, man. I got to have a sponsor before then. And the next morning at the club, Sunday morning, she sat right next to me. I didn't even know who she was. And I was like, she told me her name. I was like, "Are you Sandy Mikesell?" And she was like, "Yeah." And I said, "Will you be my sponsor?" And she said, call me every day. And I said, okay. So I did. And I started doing what that lady asked me to do. And what I found is on every Thursday at 6 o'clock, she'd pick me up from that recovery house. And every Thursday at 6 o'clock, I never once doubted that that lady wasn't going to pull up in that driveway to get me to go do book work. Never once did it cross my mind that she might not show up tonight. Or she might not answer the phone when I call her at 3 o'clock every day, because that's what time she told me to call her. Never once did I not think she wasn't going to call me back. She began to start teaching me what it was like, what to do, what I say I'm going to do. Be a woman of integrity. Clean my mouth up and act like a lady, because I was in the streets for a long time, and I didn't know how to do that anymore. And she showed me by living it. And every Thursday, she never would talk. We would read this book line by line and page by page. And when we got to a step, we worked it. And my life began to change. But I didn't see it for a long time. But I do remember my reactions being different, because I was a fighter. I love to fight. And what I know to be true today is, when I get angry and want to fight you, it's probably some sort of fear, because fear to me comes out as anger. And when I'm angry, my neck starts getting red and I'm ready to fight, it's probably because I'm in fear. Well, it is because I'm in fear. And I need to look at that. So I didn't turn immaculate right away, because this is an overnight process, right? We can't get this overnight. It takes a lot of practice. And I remember working step one. I remember sitting down across from this lady and telling her that my life wasn't unmanageable. I was living in a recovery house. I was still on parole. I had no clothes to my name except the prison-issued jeans that I had and some slides. And I got out in October, and I didn't even have tennis shoes. And I said, I can see my life's powerless, but not unmanageable. And she said, Amy, you're homeless. And I was like, oh, okay. So maybe I am unmanageable. So I am so crazy, right? Because I think, like, I got this still. I could be in the deep, deep hole. Oh, and what I forgot to tell you is when I got arrested the last time, I found out a friend of mine was in jail for child support. So I knew that was at least a 6-month sentence. And he lived by himself in an apartment, and his apartment is free, so now that apartment is mine. He's in jail. I would just climb through his window, open up his front door, and let the screen door stay open like I lived there, y'all. And I didn't think anything was wrong with that. I lived in this man's apartment for probably 2 months. No electric, no water. That's all right. I had Febreze candles. Yep. And I was living life. That was my apartment. So that's how I was living when I got locked up. So we started working these steps, and when I got to 2, I came, right? Because she told me to go to a meeting every day, not do 90 and 90. She said, you go to a meeting every day. I said, well, somebody said something about 90 and 90. She said, you go to a meeting every day till I tell you not to. I said, yes, ma'am. But in my head, I was like, that, I call her all kinds of names. For the first 6 months she sponsored me, I couldn't call her by her first name. It was sponsor lady. And that's pretty much how I said it, that sponsor lady. And she laughs about it today. My pigeon calls me that now, and I'm like, you're welcome. But so anyways, I just came, and I kept coming. And I kept coming, and I saw that there evidence in you guys that y'all were staying sober, and y'all were happy, joyous, and free. There was evidence all around this room. I just didn't know if it was going to happen for me, right? Because I'm unique. I thought maybe it's good for y'all, but maybe. But then I started to believe after a lot of meetings, maybe I can do this too, right? That lady kept talking to me. Everybody else I told you left me. Everybody that left me, she did not. She put up with my crazy and loved me through it. So I just came to believe that this power was working in your life, and maybe it'll work for mine. So step 3, I made a decision, right? That's it. Make a decision. Some people say make a decision to finish 4 through 9. I was always taught that when I make a decision to have a cup of coffee, there's some action behind it, right? I have to get the coffee beans. I have to grind them. I have to put them in the maker. I have to add water, wait for it to brew, then fix it like I want it. Then I can have a cup of coffee. So that's what I did in 3. I made a decision to do the rest of the steps, and then I did the action behind it. And then 4, I made a list I was not happy about this list. But I was, because I knew plenty of people I was mad at. Every time I drank, I complained about those people an awful lot. I would give oral resentment list to you right now because I got to be a victim somehow so I could get the next drink. So I did verbal resentments all the time. But to write them on paper and to put the truth on paper of who I was mad at and why. And then I couldn't see the other two columns, right? Because I'm not supposed to see it. I need that sponsor to help me see what those other two columns are. So I write down everybody I'm mad at, and I write down what, well, tell me why you're mad. I'm sure, I'll write it down. So I start writing down why I'm mad at them. And they're like, and what did it affect in you? Well, I'll tell you that too. It affected everything. Everything. And what was your part? Well, getting to know them. That was my part. But what I know today is a whole different step forward. And I'm so grateful for this process because I wouldn't be here without it. And on the fifth step, I got invited to this sponsor lady's house for the first time ever. And I thought, look at me, I'm getting sober. Because I got invited to, we always met at the coffee shop. She heard my record, right? She knew what kind of person I was. She was like, this lady is not coming out. She is 75 now. But she took me to her house, and she took me upstairs, and we got on our knees, and we said the third step prayer, and we had a chair out for God. And I thought she was inviting somebody else at first. I was like, why has she got another chair pulled out? But I understood when we got on our knees. At the end of that third step prayer, she told me, well, she didn't tell me, she prayed it out loud. And God let Amy say all the things she's holding back. And I thought, oh my gosh, she knows. She knows I have some secrets. Those are the first two things out of the box. Were the two secrets only me and God were there for. Nobody else was around. Nobody else could tell it. And those are the first two things out of the bag. Because I needed to stay sober. I really wanted to stay sober this time. And I had never stayed sober before. So the only thing different for me was not telling on myself. And it's not a big deal. Her head didn't explode. You know, she's still alive. She still loves me. No judgment. And that's all I needed was somebody to kindly love me through my mess. She sent me home. Well, she drove me to Roy's house, and I sat on his back porch for an hour to do step 6 and 7. And he has this glass sunroom. It sounds like special. It has a nice glass, but a lot of land. And there was like 2 deer running out while I'm doing the 6 and 7 prayer. So I see another God shot, right? My sponsor told me early on to keep a notebook. Write all my God shots down. Because there's going to be one day that I can't see God. And I can pull that book out and read some of those God shots. Mm-hmm. And it's helped me along my sobriety. And that was a God shot for me. I saw those deer running out and living, you know, their life. And here I am sitting in protection. Just gave a 5th step. Now, I didn't see the promise of the 5th step promises right away. You know how it talks about we'll walk hand in hand with our Creator. I did not see that freedom right away because I was still full of shame. And while I was doing the 6 and 7, I asked God and I begged Him, why did you let me live? Why didn't you take the breath out of my body, letting me walk around doing this to people? I saw the woman I was after step 5. I saw the true woman that I was. And I was mad at God. And that's okay because He's a great big God. He can take it. But in step 6 and 7, I had a spiritual experience. I didn't have a good feeling after 5 because it wasn't time for me to have a good feeling. I got it in 6 and 7 when I got to tell God how mad I was at Him and the type of person I had lived to be my whole life and kept dragging people through the mud. It wasn't a good walking hand in hand with my Creator. But step 6 and 7, that drew me to my knees. It says humbly ask Him, right? Humbly. I couldn't do nothing but be humble at the person I was doing those steps. I got to 8, and I took my list from 4, and I added some things onto that list. And went out. I sought wise counsel, of course, from sponsors on how to do this. And that husband I left, I wrote a letter to. And I never heard anything back. 2 years into sobriety, my daughter got married and invited me to the wedding. And that was the most awkward thing because I thought, well, first of all, my daughter invited me to her wedding, right? I mean, I was a mother. I should have never, rightfully so, they should have never talked to me the rest of their life, right? Because of the person I was. 2 years sober, this little girl comes back into my life. invites me to be the mother of the bride. I worked every Thursday. Me and my sponsor worked on how do I act, what do I do. There's going to be alcohol there, take a friend, blah, blah, blah. All the rules and regulations to how to get through this. But my ex's family was going to be there. My ex-husband was going to be there. He sent me divorce papers while I was in prison. So I was like, sign them, send them on. And but I hadn't made a face-to-face amends with him yet. So I went to the wedding. All his siblings were there. Everybody was drinking. And I was working because I'm a 19-time felon. There's a guy that owns a restaurant. He's passed away now, but Barbecue Joe had 7 more days of sobriety than I did. And when I was living in that recovery house, he gave me a job. Thank God, right? I got this job running a drive-through, and I thought, look at me. I got a job. I had a money drawer, and one of the lieutenants from the jail would come in on Saturday mornings to get biscuits, and I was doing takeout that day, and he walked up. I was like, hey, Lieutenant Saunders, look at me. They gave me a cash register and everything. He was like, dang, Barham, you're going far. But anyways, he was like, wow, that's great. I had like 8 months of sobriety. Anyways, I was just so proud. And but my daughter said, hey, do you think Barbecue Joe's will cater my wedding? And I said, I'm sure. So she came in and sat down and tasted all these different foods. God not only sent me with somebody, but they catered the whole meal. So now I have 2 more people in this far away. We were an hour and a half from home and away from all my people. So I took a friend with me. And then my 2 friends from Barbecue Joe's, after they catered, they changed their clothes and they sat with me at the wedding. So I wasn't alone. And that's powerful because I didn't have friends like that back anytime. So I got to see that man, and I got to hug him, and I got to see my mom at that wedding, and I hugged her. And one of the ex-brother-in-laws that really hated my guts because I did his brother really bad. He hated me. And he walked up to me and said, I'm proud of what you're doing. If you need anything, I'm right down the street. He lives in Greensboro. And I thought, wow, look at God, right? We didn't drink, but I'm telling you what, the bartender kept filling up our tea. I drank so much tea that night. Me and my friend, everybody was drinking there, and I didn't notice, right? Because I was dancing, I was having a good time, and I was sober. And I was being free, happy, joyous, and free. On step 10, I continue to take personal inventory. And I'm not great at it. I don't do it every night. But I do whenever it gets hot. I know exactly what to do whenever I get uncomfortable in my own skin and what I got to do. And today, something happens whenever I know I've done something I owe an amends. It gets me a little icky. And when I get that icky feeling, I got to do something right away. And I call a sponsor. First, I pray and ask God to remove it. I call my sponsor or call another woman in my fellowship. I make an amends where needed, and then I turn my thoughts to someone I can help. And most of the time, that's praying for someone else. Because if I just pray for someone else and not for me, it always works out to be the best. 11, I do all kinds of stuff for my spiritual growth. Like this. This is one thing. Where it says God as we understood Him, I didn't understand the we. The we is us, right? I understand God as we understand Him together, all together. So when I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm closer to my power. I do all kinds of stuff in the church and the other organizations. I'm on the board at Hope Valley in the mountains. I do all kinds of stuff to add to my step 11. 12, sponsor women today. I come and do things like this. I practice these principles, or try to, in all my affairs. So I was born a liar, right? I lied. I remember just kidding, but I remember kind of. My mom said, whenever I took my first walk, she said, you've always been a little dramatic. When you took your first walk, and she said, oh, look, Amy's walking. And I said, I took 2 steps instead of just 1, right? Because I'm over dramatic. And I would just fight with you tooth and nail if it was embellishment or if it was, because I could still find myself doing that, and I have to tell on myself right away, because starting with little bit of stuff, embellishing, I had 2 donuts today, but I really ate 3, like that could get me started into something I can't get out of. So I have to be honest with where I'm at with somebody. And I got to continue working step 10. Right before I celebrated 5 years sober, I remember asking my sponsor, because I kept hearing all this stuff about a lot of people relapse 5 years. A lot of people relapse 5 years. And I kept hearing that and hearing that. And I was really in fear because I thought, am I really working this thing? Am I doing to the best of my ability? I'm going to meetings. I am sponsoring people, but am I really working it? Because I don't know. So I tell her, and I'm like, I'm really in fear. So we started doing a fear inventory and an in-depth fear inventory, and I found out a lot more stuff I was afraid of. I'm so grateful for that. Because then after doing that fear inventory, I found all kinds of stuff I was still scared of. And then she said, and you go talk with somebody with 10 years or more sober and meet with them and ask them what they did. And so I did. And I met some of my best friends. 2 of them have over 30 years of sobriety. And I sat down with them and said, what do you do? How do you stay sober today? And they told me. They say, you work step 10 and you work it to depth. Like you dig in it and you work step 10 and you won't drink. So I work this on a daily basis. I get up in the morning and I pray and I hand my day over to God. I take it back and I take it back, and because I'm human also, and I'm alcoholic, and I got to remind myself of that every day. One of my coolest amends I'm going to tell you about. So 3 years ago last week, my mom called. Okay. She sent me, we started like texting. After the amends letter, she would send me a text. I said, Mom, I went to my sponsor. I said, what do I do with somebody that won't give you an address and doesn't give you a phone number? How do you make amends with those people? My sponsor said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to pray about it. And then we'll come up with a solution. The next week we met. She goes, I want you to send her flowers on Mother's Day and her birthday every year. I said, she won't give me an address. She goes, can your daughter get the address? I said, yes. So we have to do a little finagling, right? We're like, masterminds. So I call Ashley. I'm like, I'm going to send you money. Will you send my mom flowers for Mother's Day and her birthday? So I did that every year for 6 years. And every year, twice a year, Mother's Day and her birthday. I don't know if my daughter put my name on it, and it really didn't matter. It just was me doing the action of sending the flowers to that lady. And one year, 3 years ago, this past year, New Year's Day, she texted me and said, Happy New Year's. And I had to reply back, who is this? Because I don't have her name. I don't have her phone number. She said, it's your mom. And our relationship didn't blossom after that. I would text about once a month, hey, just seeing how you're doing. And it would be like, I'm fine, love you. Very brief. Well, in August of 3 years ago, she called and said that she had a very big doctor's appointment coming up, and she would want me to be there for it. I'm like, oh, God. So here we go, back to sponsor. Okay, what do I do? How do I do this? She said, well, you're going to drive yourself, of course. She said, so you'll have a way out. She goes, are you going to stay with her? I said, yeah, I guess so. I don't know. So I stayed 2 nights and 3 days. I go down there. I drive 11 hours, and when I get in the car at 6 o'clock the morning I left, my phone never stopped ringing from the moment I hit her doorway. From Alcoholics Anonymous women calling me, telling me they're praying for me. I had meetings all day long on the phone. I never turned the radio on because that's how many women just wanted to be there to support me on the way down. I get down to my mom's house, and I go in. I haven't seen her in years. And I go in, and she's been sick a little bit longer than what I thought. And her house needed to be cleaned. My sponsor told me to go and be of service. That's what I did. I cleaned her house. I went to the grocery store because she didn't have no food. So I went to the grocery store and I put some groceries in her house. And I went to that doctor's appointment, and that doctor was putting her on hospice that day. I leave that doctor's appointment. I asked Mom, can I please go to the noon meeting? I looked up a meeting, found one. If y'all want to know where the old timers are, they're in Florida. There's a bunch of them down there. And so I stepped foot in this meeting, and it was pretty cool because the topic of the meeting was living amends, and that's not even in our book. And I thought, God has me exactly where I'm supposed to be. I went home, and when I went back to my mom's house that afternoon, She looked at me and she said, "That's the first time I ever believed that you were coming back." She died 6 days later. I know that I didn't have a relationship with that woman that I wanted, but I do know that she died knowing that her daughter was safe and secure in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that I'm a sober woman of God today. And I'm so grateful for that, because I don't have that guilt and shame anymore. But that's all I got time for. Let me read this one little piece. It's one of my favorite stories in the back of the book, and it's called A Late Start. And I like to end here because this wraps up AA for me. It's on page 534. It says, AA has filled my days with friends, laughter, growth, and the feeling of worth that is rooted in constructive activity. My faith in and contact with my higher power shines more brightly than I've dreamed it could. Those promises I thought were impossible are a viable force in my life. I am free to laugh all of my laughter, and free to trust and be trusted, free to both give and receive help. I am free from shame and regret, free to learn and grow and work. I have left that lonely, frightening, painful express train through hell. I have accepted the gift of a safer, happier journey through life. Thank you.